Welcome, everybody. This is the third series that the Institute organized together with Maria Teresa Cometto. The first one was about Italian managers in the US companies. The second was dedicated to outstanding Italian women in the US. And this third series is Italian creators of our time. And what we intended with the word creator is a creator for us and for Maria Teresa and me is someone who invents something that was not there before. Being a scientist, an artist, an entrepreneur, everyone. Italian history boasts many examples of famous creators, beginning with Leonardo da Vinci, whose 500th anniversary from his death is celebrated this year. So we decided to organize a series of conversations with Italian professionals who mastered this creative ability, which is one of the peculiarities of Italian personality. In a series of talks in collaboration with the Consulate General of Italy, and I thank Francesco Genuardi, Consul General, that is with us tonight, we will meet some of the most interesting Italian creative innovators of our time. The next will be on 21st of February, Federico Faggin, inventor and entrepreneur, widely known for designing the first commercial microprocessor of the world. But the first guest of tonight is Elena Favilli, who could be also the last one of the previous series, because it's an outstanding Italian woman in the US, but is also an Italian creator of our time. Elena Favilli, she's the creator, with Francesca Cavallo, the global best-selling series Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls, which has broken records of on crowdfunding website Kickstarter. The first book of Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls was published in 2016 and has since been translated into 48 languages. Favilli has written for Colors Magazine, McSweeney, Il Post, and La Repubblica, and has managed digital newsrooms globally. Elena Favilli studied semiotics at the University of Bologna and later won a scholarship at the University of Berkeley. So please welcome Elena Favilli and Maria Teresa Cometto.
Thank you so much, Director Giorgio Van Straten, for agreeing to organize together this new series of conversations. Thank you, General Consul Francesco Genuardi, for supporting this initiative. And thank you, Elena, for accepting our invitation.
Thank you all.
I'm so happy to start this new series with a great young woman who has become famous for celebrating the inspiring stories of many other great women. In the audience, I know there are many fans of yours who will be able to ask you questions in a little while. Once upon a time, there is not a girl waiting for her Prince Charming in your book, Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls. Instead, there are 100 tales of extraordinary women who are scientists, judges, painters, politicians, writers, and
astronauts.
They range from the Egyptian ruler Cleopatra to the rock star Beyoncé, from the Italian Baroque painter Artemisia Gentileschi to the scientist and mathematician Ada Lovelace, again from the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher to Coco Chanel. Who, by the way, is the favorite of my little niece, Olga, in Italy.
Yeah, she's very popular in our audience. They all love
Coco
her.
Chanel? Yeah. So, my first question is, how did you choose these women? Did you get suggestions from nieces or from friends' daughters?
No. No, I don't. No. Definitely, it didn't start with any suggestions. Well, maybe for volume 2, at that point when we already had an audience, suggestions started to come in. But for volume 1, it was completely an internal process, and the main criteria that we used to select these women were I guess you mentioned, the most important ones. So first of all, they had to be women from across history, from the past, but also from the present. We really wanted this book to be a contemporary object and in close dialogue with our contemporary society and with what's going on in the world. So it's not just an encyclopedia about historical and powerful women, but it's really also a collection of a living and breathing object that is giving voice to the women who today are changing the world. And then the second criterion was to include women who represent different professions, like anything, and just like you said, from astronauts to rulers to chefs or judges or tennis players, singers, so that we could show young women and young girls, especially, that they can really aspire, just as boys, just as men, to do and to become what they want, whatever it is that they want, right? That there are no limits to what it's possible to imagine and to achieve.
Who is the astronaut? The Italian Samantha? Or
In volume 2, there's Samantha Cristoforetti. In volume 1, Mae Jemison, the American astronaut. And it's a celebration of work. Honestly, like, that was also one of the core and of the strongest values of both this collection. It's really a celebration of not just talent and success, because some success comes for many of these women in some cases. It doesn't always come, or sometimes it just comes very late in their lives. But it's especially a celebration of the path that gets you there. It's a celebration of the work, the persistence, and the studying, all those values that are, I guess, very, very close to me also.
Yeah, as we're going to discover right now.
Yeah.
What about the feedback from your readers? What are the comments that you got more frequently, and are there favorite women?
Yeah, I guess that one of the most frequent comments or feedbacks, especially from young girls, is that it happens that they come to me and they say, "Oh, one day I will be in this book too," because they have this special and very close relationship with this book, because I guess these characters are. We didn't describe them as just in a celebratory tone, right? We really try to describe their struggles, their ordinary life, what even if it in just a short page, because the format is very short, right? It's 100 stories with 100 short stories and a portrait for each one. So we had, in a few words, to just create to spark their imagination with some conversation starters, right? Some elements that could really capture their imagination and potentially push them to discover more than about these women. So one of the most common feedback is that then they want to know more about these women. Then they read about them, and then maybe they go online to see if there are YouTube videos or if there are pictures, images. They want to discover more. So, which to me is really like the biggest accomplishment that a book can hope to achieve in its audience, right? Inviting them and pushing them to learn even more. And and independently from the book itself, right?
Yeah. So the book was translated in 48 languages, from Albanian to Vietnamese and Welsh, I read, and published in so many countries. Have you noticed differences about the way the public has reacted? I don't know, from young women in Russia compared to America or Italy or Japan?
Yeah, so the only countries that I visited on a book tour so far have been, well, other than the US, of course, the UK, Mexico, Italy, and Sweden. And just among them, you can see some differences. And the most striking difference for me was the reaction of the Mexican audience in Guadalajara last year at the book fair. First of all, it was a slightly older audience. It was skewing more towards teenagers than elementary school kids. And also, it was a very emotional audience, because in a country like Mexico, where violence against women is so common and so widespread, so profound, this book had a huge impact, and it became kind of a symbol of hope, right? A beacon of hope for so many people. So, and I didn't know. I mean, of course, I know about the drug war in Mexico and the kidnapping and the killings, but as it often happens even in war zones or in war situations, the women. Nobody talks about what happens to the women, right? Nobody talks about what happens to the women who fall victims of the cartels, of the infighting between the gangs and the cartels. So it was really incredible and striking for me to see in real life that was the reaction, that that's the reality that they're living every day. And killing among young women and kidnapping among young women has been increasing in the past few years. So to see that a book could have such an impact was really moving.
Among the stories, are there fighters or, I mean, military?
There are fighters. Yeah, there's Claudia Ruggerini, the Italian partisan. There's in the Mirabel sisters. There's a few of them.
Talking about countries where women are really, not treated so well, the book has not been translated in Chinese, for example, or it's not published in Saudi Arabia or Iran. Do you have any plan about those countries?
So it's about to be published in Chinese. Our director of subsidiary rights is right here, so maybe we should ask her. So Michelle van der Poel, she probably knows better than me. But I'm sure that, in Chinese it should be coming out soon. It's not published, it's not published in Saudi Arabia, and I don't think it will, for obvious reasons. And it was published in Iran without pretty much us even realizing it, because, as you know, they have no copyright laws, and so they can pretty much, if they want, they can do it. Yeah. And it seems to be also doing quite well there, because of course there's a public, wherever there is oppression and censorship and discrimination, there's always hunger for content and for freedom. So it was a surprise in the beginning, but then it wasn't after all to discover that Turkey was and is one of our strongest foreign markets. Oh. Yeah. So and I haven't been on a book tour in Turkey, so I cannot tell you the reaction of the public there. But that was one of the most surprising results of the success.
Yeah, so the series and the first book, first of all, has been a great success. It has sold 3 million copies in the world, right?
Yeah, I think almost 4 now, almost right?
4. Fantastic.
Oh, wow. So the books, both, like the book series combined. Yeah.
Great. And as the director said, it was a record in crowdfunding online. However, when you launched the Kickstarter campaign, your startup was not doing very well. It was failing.
No, yeah, it wasn't.
And also, I mean, you had some not very pleasant experiences with traditional publishing houses. Can you tell us about something about those? I mean,
yeah, sure. So Timbuktu, which is the name of the media company behind the book series, was started in 2012. I love to say this because I see her right here, in large part from a house in Castro where Ottavia Bassetti used to live at the time. She didn't even know us, me and Francesca, but she hosted us there forever, and she gave us enough food and enough space to start the company. So I'm very, very grateful for that, and we've been very good friends ever since. And I'm saying this because, the history of a startup is always a history of the people that you meet along your journey, because it takes so much time, so much effort, and so many people to to put it all together and to try to make something out of it. So the very first idea connected to Timbuktu was a magazine for kids that was called Timbuktu Magazine, but it never became really sustainable, economically sustainable.
A magazine for the iPad.
For the iPad, yes, for the iPad. And so when we launched the crowdfunding campaign at the beginning of 2016, the company was not doing well at all. Actually, we went to Kickstarter, and we used crowdfunding as kind of our last resort, right? To try to pivot the company towards this new model, and it worked. So like many of these stories of these extraordinary women show, you just have to never give up, to try many times.
Yeah, if that is really your passion, and you believe in that idea. And but before founding Timbuktu, you were a journalist.
Yes.
So what convinced you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I guess I was a strange journalist. I've always been very interested in not just in journalism, not just in reporting the news, but I've always been very interested in the connection between content and technology, and news and technology, and how new technology affects how news is produced and delivered and distributed. So, and this started for me when I was studying at UC Berkeley in 2005, 2006, which is when I was also basically starting my master's thesis around online journalism and digital newsrooms. And I started to think that I really wanted to, not just to be a journalist, but to build my own media venture at some point in my life. So when I went back to Italy, I started, of course, my career as a journalist in different newsrooms in Milan, mostly in Milan. But there was always something missing for me. The news reporting was exciting, was fun. It's not working. Okay, it's working again. Definitely one of the most powerful learning and professional experiences that I've had. But I knew that I had to go back to the US if I wanted to try to build a media venture. And so that's what I did. I started looking for ways to go back to the Bay Area, which is where I fell in love with the US in the first place, right? And which is also where Silicon Valley happens to be, and where a lot of investors are, and a lot of companies are started and created.
Yeah, let's go back another step, and starting with the place where you were born, before going on. So you were born in Loro Ciuffenna. I don't know how many people here know where
One for
Loro
sure.
Ciuffenna is. Loro Ciuffenna is a small village in Tuscany, right? So is it true that you were the only child in that village, and how that influenced your life?
Oh my God! I mean that completely. It was. I was. Well, first of all, yes, it was true. I was the only child in the village. It's a village of, I guess now maybe 30 people. It's a beautiful village just built around a huge Romanic church in the middle of the Tuscan countryside with beautiful vineyards and olive trees. So it's really Tuscany as you imagine it, right? Especially from
Under the Tuscany sun.
Yeah, from the US, I guess. And you know, my growing up there really shaped, you know, how I am today, because I was you know, it was a very solitary experience with a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of daydreaming and imagination and imaginary friends. So I guess that, you know, it was just the perfect environment to nurture a creative mind, a creative spirit, and also an adventurous spirit, because I've always been very independent. So, I mean, I've always been very diligent, because I was really a good student and, you know, I was a good kid, but I've always also been very, very independent and strong. So, and eventually, as soon as I finished high school, I decided to go to study first in Bologna, and then to go study abroad, and then to start to have a career abroad. I mean, I wanted to be, or try to be, you know, a publisher, like the Einaudi of our dear Italy, and I was, I guess, adventurous enough or crazy enough to start to try to do that in a foreign country, right? In the U.S. So yeah, I owe everything that I am to that experience and to Loro Ciuffenna.
And so, apart from your child life there, did your Italian education help you for your creative and entrepreneurial career?
Yeah, absolutely. I always talk about my alma mater, University of Bologna, because for me it was a wonderful experience. It was kind of the defining academic experience for me, and also it was thanks to the University of Bologna that I got a full year scholarship for UC Berkeley, and so I was also able to study in the US and discover, you know, this other side of the world. So I definitely, you know, I always talk about it because, you know, I think that my strong, top quality and completely public and completely free Italian education is the backbone of, you know, of my career, and I think it's extremely important to remind people of this, to remind, well, ourselves, first of all, as Italians, but also whenever I talk, like, to any kind of audience, to remind everyone that, you know, education can be free and can be, you know, great education even when it's public, and it should be, and it's really still, despite all the problems that we have in, you know, Italian schools and Italian universities, it's still the most democratic tool for change that we have.
Maybe we'll talk later also about young Italians today, what do they think about school and jobs and so on. But going to now to California, after Berkeley, after graduating in Italy, you were accepted to the 500 Startups Accelerator Program in Mountain View, right? Which is the heart of the Silicon Valley. What did you learn there?
Well, that was a completely different experience than anything I had had before. It was like a full immersion of about 4 months in the world and the craziness of the Silicon Valley system, which, well, we were following workshops in the morning and then having fireside chats like this in the evening with entrepreneurs or investors. We learned how to do customer research, how to do product development, how to create a business deck and pitch investors. We will learn how to raise money, which it's an important piece of it. And it was an incredible experience. It was, like one of life-changing experience. And most of what I've learned there was then essential to the building of this book series. Because we are used to thinking about the creative process as something that has to be completely free of rules and free of limits, but that's not really true. I mean, it can be like that, but it doesn't usually lead to the best results. So Silicon Valley is the best place in the world where you can get that, right? They give you a very, very strong framework and method, and you develop a mindset that you will never forget after you've been there for a while. And then that mindset of building small iterations and small tests, even if it comes to literature, even if it comes to storytelling, even if it comes to writing, and then test them with your audience, and then measure what works and what doesn't, and change it accordingly to that. And that's an approach that can make a big difference in how you. Even in how you come up with a creative idea, such a book series.
However, in 2014, you left Silicon Valley and you went to Venice, not Italian Venice, but Venice in Los Angeles, right? Why? I remember that you wrote an article about the bro culture of Silicon Valley. What does it mean, the sexism of?
Yeah, that was, that was a part of it. That was also a learning experience in many ways. It's not a secret that Silicon Valley is male-dominated, as pretty much everything else in this world. But you don't necessarily expect that from a place that is so innovative and at the forefront of leading edge and at the forefront of everything that's happening in our lives and affecting our lives. So at the beginning it was exciting. We were usually the only or the few women in the rooms, and I guess at first it's wow, we must be really good, right? There are not many other women around here. But then you start to realize that it's not that cool. It's just a matter of you're actually living and witnessing discrimination as it happens, right? Because simply we started to research and to study and it became, and I couldn't honestly believe the numbers that I was reading, right? So there's such a small percentage of companies founded by women that receive formal institutional funding from VCs every year, even in the US, even in Silicon Valley, right? So suddenly we were like, oh, wow. So we were able to raise some initial capital, but then it became clear that it would have been impossible to continue to grow a company with that kind of VC backing because we didn't have, well, we were two female founders, we didn't have a male co-founder, we didn't have a tech background. So it was a bunch of different things that really didn't work out in that context. Silicon Valley people are very rigid. They they invest in what they instantly recognize and what they know. They're very highly suspicious of
I remember
anything that's different from that.
I remember once another woman founder told me that if they don't see a young guy with a hood like Mark Zuckerberg, they don't trust him.
Yeah. I met his wife recently, and she also was wearing a hoodie and baggy jeans, and I thought, this is not possible. And I thought, well, okay, I'm back in Silicon Valley again. Yeah, that's the spirit.
So is it true that you got some nasty reaction to that article, even threats?
Oh,
death threats?
Yeah. That is true. Those came mostly via Twitter at the time. I did, and it was a shocking surprise, because I've read many articles written by female journalists complaining about the harassment that they get online when they talk about specific topics, especially when they talk about sexism, and they speak up. But it had never happened to me, so I didn't. And the thing is that, like most things, like most violent things, when they happen to you, it's your perception, of course, immediately changes, right? And you start looking at that same issue in a very different way, which is, of course, more personal, and you're like, wow, how could I not, see this before? And also, that's what they're talking about. So that's why it's so difficult for women to talk about certain topics, because they're either, not taken seriously, or just diminished, or in some cases, like in some of those cases, even threatened, right? Because nobody wants you to challenge the status quo, or nobody wants to be called out as sexist. Nobody likes that. Most people are.
But before moving to LA, I remember that you were thinking of moving to New York. We talked about that, and actually New York, as we know, it is a city with a growing community of startups, and according to many studies, it is also the city more friendly to women entrepreneurs, and especially women founders of startups. And besides, there are not, it's not focused on the technology industry, but there are a lot of creative people. So why not New York?
Well,
besides the weather.
Yeah, it has certainly been friendly to me in New York, all the time, always. And one of our super early investors, Alessandro Piol, lives here in New York. He's Italian, but he's basically from New York. So why not New York, and why moving to LA? I guess I was in love with California, really, and before moving to New York and decided to change the coast completely, I wanted to try to live in another city different than San Francisco in California. San Francisco changed so much over the past even just 6 years. It's become like this city where it's been completely taken over by Silicon Valley. Like, it's like the kind of people that you meet, they're all the same. They all do they all wear the same kind of hoodies. They all, listen to the same kind of music. And then rent became impossible. And San Francisco is a crazy jungle right now. So I said, okay, let's try LA before the big jump to the other coast, and it worked. I love LA. I love the spirit of LA. I love the space. So I like to come to New York and to spend time here and to get all this energy and to meet all these wonderful creative people who live here. But I also love to go back to LA, which really feels home to me now, because it's wild, but it's also a big city, and it gives you space because you're in touch with nature, which, growing up in Loro Ciuffenna is a big part of who I am. So I think eventually that's why. It was just a very personal reason, but not really a business reason. I'm sure that New York is great for startups now. Actually, we now, Timbuktu now, has an office in New York, in Astoria, at WeWork.
The emerging
Astoria. And I was just there today, and it's great. So I think I will spend definitely more time in New York now. But LA and California is my home.
And what about Italy? Which relationship do you still have with Italy? Do you have offices there? Do you have collaborators?
Yeah, so we have offices in Santa Monica, in New York, and one in London now. So the company is now 20 people, full-time employees. So it's grown exponentially in the past 2 years, basically, and it's been quite an interesting learning experience, because of course when you go from 2 people to 20 people, there are many things that have to change and to grow accordingly. And Italy, no, we don't have an office in Italy, but we do work with a lot of Italian artists and illustrators. And of course, we have a strong relationship, and with Italy, we go there quite often for presentations and book tours. The Italian edition of the book, which is published by Mondadori, was a smashing success. It was the best-selling book of 2017. It's one of the best-selling books of 2018. So it's a very personal relationship that I have, of course, with Italy, and the art that it's in the book. It's one of the strongest, I guess, elements of this bond, of this relationship, because many of the artists that worked with us are Italian. And actually tomorrow night, one of the artists who worked on volume 2 with 4 portraits, Giulia Tomai, is going to be celebrated at the New York Society of Illustrators. All 4 of her portraits were selected this year, and tomorrow night it's the opening evening of the exhibit.
Beautiful, beautiful. Talking about Italy, young Italians, they may have free education, but this morning I read an appalling piece of news that according to a survey paid by the Italian government, 78% of young Italians are thinking of leaving the country in search for a job. I was shocked by these statistics. What would you tell them, and what advice would you give them? What do you think?
Well, that's a really complicated question. I don't think I have any I cannot even imagine how difficult it must be for a young Italian student right now to come out of school. When I'm not that old, so it wasn't a long time ago since I was a college student, but it was different. Italy is now in a recession, and that makes it
for many years,
and it's been for a long time now, I guess. So it makes a total difference. I found a job right out of college in Milan when I graduated in 2007. I think that it was rare even at the time, but I guess that now it's it's like unheard of. So I don't know. I don't know what they. The only thing that I know is that you cannot blame it on the quality of the education. I think the situation is way more complex than that, because there is this tendency I've noticed in Italy, especially among young people, to say that, oh, but why bother? Why should I study? Why should I even go to university or to college or to school when, in any case, nobody is ever going to give me a job? But that's so crazy to think about that, because that's not the correlation that's in place, right? There are so many other aspects that are contributing to this situation, and still having a great top quality education is really like the only the only advantage that you can give to yourself for a better future, being in Italy or abroad. I mean, that really then depends also on, you know, what you want from your life. Not everyone wants to leave Italy, thank God. I mean, I'm sure that there are many, many brilliant Italian students that just want to you know, have a normal life and find a job there.
Or maybe they want to go back and forth,
or maybe go back and forth, like I do.
Talking about education in children and going back to Timbuktu, as you said, your first product was a digital magazine for iPad, and also you do a lot of video games, right? Stuff like that.
Apps, yes, mobile apps, yeah.
Apps, and so an app to make a pizza, right?
Yeah, we experimented with many different apps.
Yeah. So, but there is some concern among parents and even among people in the tech industry that children are spending too much time on screens. So what is your approach to that problem?
Well, my approach is books now. So I guess that's my very short answer to that. I was so tired, honestly, of developing apps. When I started working on Timbuktu, the iPad magazine, I was really fascinated by this new medium, the iPad, that had just come out and that seemed to be so promising for the future of news, the future of magazines, the future of books and reading. But in the end, it wasn't that promising after all. I mean, it's a great medium, but for a certain kind of things, definitely not for reading, definitely not for news consumption or magazine consumption. But you know, nobody knew at the time. How could you, right? You had to try and it was, you know, brand new world. It was a brand new medium. You had to just give it a try. But one of the main reasons why I decided to pivot towards, you know, physical objects and books particularly was exactly what you just mentioned, that I could see that after a while it was a bit meaningless, right? Kids use the iPad in a way that it's not necessarily very, very empowering, let's say, or, you know, enriching for them. And they mostly use it for games, for gaming experiences. And and Timbuktu Pizza was actually our most successful game, which was okay for a while because it gave us enough money to keep going, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I mean, I'm not a game developer, I'm not a game designer, I'm not interested in building and selling games. I wanted to create amazing editorial experiences, and so I had just to find another way to do it.
Yeah. So Rebel Girls empower girls, young women, but on the other hand, mothers of boys, sometimes now they complain that it is the boys today that who feel more insecure or under pressure, and so they say there's a problem there. Are you thinking of creating a new book for boys as well?
Oh, there are many out there already. Everybody's trying to go after us and copy us, so I don't need to create one. No, it was never part of the plan. It was never part of our intentions, and we anticipated that, you know, we could generate some controversy, I guess. But, you know, and I understand the argument that boys need to be also educated in a different way, but definitely, from my perspective, women and girls are the ones who need these kind of stories the most. So that's, you know, the main reasons why we decided to focus on girls. Also, I think that you cannot do too many things at the same time well, if you want to do them well. I mean, if you're just chasing sales and market penetration, then yes, you can do many things at the same time. But if you want to have an impact that is not just based on revenue and unit sales, but it's based on, you know, some larger mission and values, then you cannot do everything at the same time.
Great. Because there are also many young fans in the audience and they get maybe too tired, I would stop now with my question and invite them to ask questions or any other in the audience.
How many other books are you going to make?
Oh, many, many. I don't know yet, but I have at least 2 in my mind right now. So I just need to decide which one I want to start first. But it's a secret. I can tell you afterwards. I can whisper it in your ear, but I cannot say it in public.
Do you have any suggestion? What would you like to read? No? Okay.
It's okay. You can think about it.
No, I'm wondering, are you're always the author of your products, your books, or you're planning also because now you have a big, yes, platforms, or you're going to engage also other authors for other projects?
Yeah, that's actually what yeah, thank you. It's a very good question. It's actually what we are working on now. The whole Timbuktu team is in New York this week because we are working on the new projects that will come out in the fall. And one of the new things that will happen is that we'll start also working with other authors, and we'll start to bring them in and to give voice to emerging female talent also from that perspective. One of the main, I guess, missions and reasons for the company and especially for this collection of books has always been to use these books as a platform to showcase the best female talent. And we started with illustrators and with female illustrators, and now we're going to use our platform to expand on this mission and also to give voice also to female writers.
Hi. First of all, congratulations. I'm a big fan. I bought this book, believe it or not, in Puglia 2 years ago while I was vacationing with my family. A grandmother was reading the book to her grandkids, and it was a little cave. And I got curious, and my daughter was like, "Mommy, I want to go there." So we were like reading with this grandma all these stories, and I had no idea of the project. And immediately, of course, I bought them, both since I live here, both in Italian and in English.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and we read them. My daughter is only 4.5. Sometimes she gets bored, of course, because it's still too much for her. But I picked a few ones characters that she already knows, because we have other books like Frida Kahlo, like Angelou, or so many others. Which books? My question to you is, which books did inspire you most in thinking of this project? And even I will expand upon this question later on, but I have a few books that have made my own mindset, my own person, and inspire me when I also write. But which books did inspire you, if there were any at all? Thank you.
Yeah, so when I started researching, not writing, but researching this concept and this idea for this book, one of the books that I was reading at the time was this wonderful book about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I don't remember the exact title right now, but it was something like Notorious RBG, and it was a very dense in content, but it also was a mix of different styles, with photographs, with pictures from the archives of documents that, of course, she had worked on. So it was this patchwork of different materials, and I love the fact that it had started on the internet on Tumblr, as a Tumblr by this young law student who who was in love, as many young law students, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and decided to start writing about her on her blog on Tumblr. And I thought, wow, this is so amazing. It was really fascinating to me to see how something that started as a blog, as a passion project online, like I had done many times for different projects and ideas, could then become and turn into a book and become a smashing success, a New York Times bestseller, etc. So probably if I had to choose, one book that was really like pivotal and was really inspirational for me at that time, I would say that one.
Hi, I'm a big fan, and I've been following your work since 2016. And one of the things that I discovered was when you started your crowdfunding campaign, you were asking for seed money of $40,000. When you surpassed every expectation of getting, now please correct me if I'm wrong, I was just going through my old notes, you reached, I think, you reached that amount of $180,000 and not $40,000, is that correct?
It was actually way more than.
And that was okay. So this was in May of 2016.
I'm sorry, but within the first few weeks probably was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now, how do you? What comments or what reflections do you have that made it such a astoundingly successful crowdfunding campaign? And what recommendations would you give anybody who would like to try the same thing?
Well,
Yeah, because there are thousands of projects on Kickstarter, and very few have this kind of success.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. Crowdfunding is very hard, and it's always a combination of many different things. There's not just one reason why a campaign can become successful. And we were lucky enough and good enough to combine several different elements of, that usually lead to a successful crowdfunding campaign. One is definitely research and preparation. So I think that I started at least for almost 1 year before launching the campaign. So it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of preparation. Can
you explain research what?
Well, a crowdfunding campaign is a very complex object. It's not something that you can just pull off and you can, put it online and hope that someone will discover it.
Hope that the idea is so good.
Yeah, that someone will stumble upon it and then start giving you money, right? So that's a big piece of it, and I will tell you more the specifics about if you're interested how to prepare and to build a crowdfunding campaign. But then the other reason and the other important element is that timing. I mean, you need to be extremely passionate about the project and the story that you're bringing to life. And in our case, I guess that there was this element of real, pure authenticity that people could see. Our personal story was really driving the project and the values of the project, and people could recognize that and immediately felt part of this journey with us, right? And so that personal connection, when it happens, it rarely happens, but when it happens, it can move mountains, right? And then word of mouth starts, and people talk about it, and they say, I just bought this. You should buy it. You should buy it too for your kid. And then it's like an avalanche, like building and building. And then the other reason is, and the other big element is being in close dialogue with society, with what's going on with society. We launched this campaign. When I say timing, I mean when we launched this campaign, it was during it was before the elections. It was during the presidential campaign in 2016, and so there was kind of a moment where also a lot of people were hungry for that kind of stories and content and change. There was an entire country that was, for the first time, debating around, oh, are we going to have the first female president or not? I mean, there was that whole debate also going on, which I think was really like a key element also of the success, honestly. And we saw it, especially after the campaign, and when the book was published in November. So the book then became available in bookstores and online right after the elections. And then, you know, it became also like this beacon and this totem for a large part of the population who felt somehow, you know, flabbergasted, I guess. And so it's always really a combination of many things. But the most important piece is that you have to have something that you're deeply passionate about, and the audience, if that is true, the audience will typically recognize that, and you have to study and to prepare a lot. And the way that we did it and that I did it was specifically by building a newsletter and building a mailing list over time, almost over 1 year, by sending one different email every week, almost every week, not always, but with a different story about some extraordinary woman from the past and the present. So it was a way of building an audience and testing the concept at the same time along the way, so that when then we decided to create a campaign and to launch the campaign, the concept was so clearly defined and so strong, and the title was so strong, and everything was already there. The key elements, I mean, the title, of course, is one of the main elements of the success of this book. The format. Now you see many books with these formats and, you know, with these covers, but it's easy now, right? When you see when there's always something that is successful out there. But it was everything was perfect at that time, right? And to do that, you need a lot of research. Yeah.
Bestseller, you have to be called Elena if you're Italian, because you are the second, the first Elena.
Oh wow, yeah.
No, just to say it's a very fantastic evening of Italian pride. You are a true innovator, as you said, and I think you are in line also with the great artist Lucio Fontana, who is now displayed here at the Istituto di Cultura. Those kind of Italians who are ahead of the times, who are disruptors, innovators. And then a few years after, everybody says, "But I could have done that." It's very normal. And I think that also opening your book, you can see a lot of Italy inside the illustrators, as you said. Also the Italian capacity of making a long story short, because it's also, I think it's quite Italian. That not always, but not
Usually
always, but
Usually
when we want, we are like that. And no, I think that's also the Italian curiosity, openness to the world, because you have picked up personalities from all over the world, and that's also very Italian to be everywhere and to know all parts of the world. So grazie, I congratulate the director, Giorgio Van Straten, and Maria Teresa Cometto for this new creator series.
Thank you.
Very, very good, and I think you have really made this Istituto di Cultura the home of Italian creativity, and we are all very grateful. Grazie.
Thank you. Grazie.